426 Hemi vs. L88 Corvette 427 Showdown. Street versus track. Everyone knew that guy with the L88 Corvette who acted like he owned the fastest thing on four wheels. Aluminum heads, racing cam, and a price tag that made your dad wince just looking at the window sticker. That hood bulge wasn't just for show. And when he fired up that 427, the sound was pure mechanical precision that made every gearhead in the neighborhood stop what they were doing. Then your neighbor's older brother came home from Vietnam driving his Hemi Cuda, and suddenly that sophisticated Chevy didn't look quite so intimidating anymore. This is the story of what happened when Detroit's most brutal street engine went head-to-head with America's most sophisticated racing machine. Chrysler's approach of overwhelming violence versus Chevrolet's precision engineering. What nobody expected was how this battle would expose the difference between impressive engineering and actual performance. And wait until you hear what happened when these two legends finally faced off at drag strips across America in 1970. The 426 Hemi wasn't built to be civilized or user-friendly. This was Chrysler's declaration of war against anyone foolish enough to line up next to one at a red light. When Mopar engineers put hemispherical combustion chambers in a street engine, they were creating mechanical violence with license plates. Walking up to a Hemi car felt like approaching something that had escaped from a drag strip. That distinctive dual snorkel air cleaner looked ready to inhale small children, and the sound when someone fired it up was part mechanical symphony, part controlled explosion that made your chest vibrate from half a block away. What made the Hemi special was those hemispherical combustion chambers. While other engines used traditional wedge-shaped chambers, the Hemi's design allowed massive valves to breathe like nothing else available. Each cylinder head could flow air like a hurricane and burn fuel with the efficiency of a blast furnace. Chrysler officially rated the street Hemi at 425 horsepower, but everyone with a stopwatch knew that was fiction. Independent testing consistently showed street Hemis making between 470 and 500 horsepower at the flywheel, with enough torque to twist the frame if you weren't careful. At around $4,000 all in, a Hemi Cuda or Challenger cost serious money. But when you experienced what 500 horses felt like trying to tear the car apart, every penny seemed justified. While Chrysler was building engines like siege weapons, Chevrolet took a completely different approach with the L88. This wasn't about brute force. This was about surgical precision and building the most sophisticated racing engine that money could buy. The L88 4270 was everything the Hemi wasn't. Aluminum cylinder heads kept weight down and heat transfer up. A radical solid lifter cam was designed for sustained high RPM operation. The compression ratio was so high that the engine required racing fuel just to survive. Chevrolet officially rated the L88 at 430 horsepower, but like the Hemi, that number was fiction designed to keep insurance companies happy. Independent dyno testing showed L88s making between 540 and 560 horsepower at the flywheel, numbers that made even Hemi owners question their choices. At $4,718 for the L88 option alone, this was the most expensive engine Chevrolet had ever offered. Add that to a Corvette's base price, and you were looking at over $9,000, more than most houses cost in 1970. Chevrolet only built 116 L88 Corvettes in 1970, making them rarer than most exotic European sports cars. Chevrolet's precision engineering created a beautiful nightmare for anyone brave enough to buy an L88. This wasn't an engine you could fire up and drive to the grocery store. It was a racing machine that required racing knowledge, racing fuel, and racing courage. The L88 needed 103-octane racing fuel to survive. Try to run it on pump gas, and you'd be shopping for a new engine before the first tank was empty. The cam was so radical that the engine barely idled, and the cooling system was marginal at best. Most L88 owners discovered they'd bought the most intimidating Corvette ever built, and they were terrified to actually use it. The engine was happiest above 4,000 RPM, screaming toward redline with violence that made seasoned drag racers question their life choices. Meanwhile, the Hemi was designed for exactly the kind of abuse that street racers dished out. It ran fine on pump gas, made massive torque from idle to redline, and could be beaten mercilessly without drama. When car and driver tested both engines, the results shocked everyone. The Hemi Cuda ran 13.1 seconds at 107 miles per hour with street tires and pump gas. The L88 Corvette managed 13.3 seconds at 108 miles per hour, but only after extensive tuning and racing fuel that cost more per gallon than most people made per hour. Summer of 1970. Drag strips across America became the battleground for Detroit's two most legendary engines. Every Friday and Saturday night, Hemi cars and L88 Corvettes were lining up at Christmas trees, each carrying the hopes of their respective automotive religions. The typical race started with the L88 Corvette looking like the clear favorite. That sleek fiberglass body, those advanced aluminum heads, and everyone knowing it cost twice as much as the Hemi car. Then both cars launched, and reality hit harder than a freight train. The Hemi Cuda would leap off the line like it had been shot from a cannon, those massive rear tires hooking up and transferring every ounce of torque to forward motion. The L88 Corvette would launch hard too, but the Hemi kept pulling with relentless power that made physics textbooks obsolete. By the 8th mile marker, the Hemi was typically ahead by a car length and still accelerating. The time slips told a story that Chevrolet engineers probably wished they could erase. Hemi cars were consistently running high 12s to low 13s with minimal preparation. L88 Corvettes were running similar times, but only with extensive tuning, racing fuel, and drivers who understood exactly how to extract performance from a temperamental racing engine. When Hot Rod magazine got both cars for comprehensive testing, they discovered something that made Chevrolet's marketing department reconsider their career choices. The L88's sophisticated engineering was actually working against it in real-world conditions. The Hemi Cuda they tested ran consistent 13.0 second quarter miles on pump gas with street tires. No drama, no special tuning, no racing fuel. Just mash the throttle and collect time slips. The L88 Corvette was a different story. On racing fuel with optimal tuning, it could match the Hemi's times. But on pump gas, which is what most owners actually used, it ran mid-1300s and felt disappointing everywhere except at wide-open throttle above 5,000 RPM. Motor Trend noted that the L88 promises more than most drivers can actually extract, while praising the Hemi as the most honest high-performance engine ever offered to the public. The problem wasn't that the L88 was a bad engine. It was that Chevrolet had built a racing engine for people who weren't racers. The Hemi's dominance came down to one simple truth. It was designed for exactly the kind of performance that street racers actually wanted. Peak torque started around 2,800 RPM and stayed strong all the way to 6,000 RPM, which meant brutal power everywhere you'd actually use it. The Hemi ran fine on pump gas, didn't require special maintenance, and could be beaten mercilessly without complaining. It was user-friendly violence that delivered consistent performance regardless of driver skill level. The L88 required racing knowledge that most street racers didn't possess. It needed high-octane fuel, precise tuning, and drivers who understood how to extract performance from a temperamental racing engine. In the right hands with the right preparation, it could be devastating. In typical hands, it was just expensive. By 1971, every serious street racer in America knew the truth. The most expensive, most sophisticated engine Chevrolet had ever built was being consistently outrun by Chrysler's brute force approach to making power. By late 1970, Hemi cars had developed a fearsome reputation as giant killers. Word spread through the muscle car underground that these Mopar monsters could embarrass anything foolish enough to challenge them, regardless of price or sophistication. L88 owners were learning expensive lessons about the difference between racing credentials and street performance. These cars required racing knowledge, racing preparation, and racing budgets to extract their potential. The magazines eventually caught on to what street racers already knew. Super Stock and Drag Illustrated called the Hemi the most complete street performance package ever offered, while CarCraft stated that, dollar for dollar and gallon for gallon, nothing beats a Hemi for real-world performance. Today, the collector car market tells an interesting story about both philosophies. A good Hemi Cuda brings $400,000 to $600,000 at auction, while an L88 Corvette commands $500,000 to $700,000. Both are serious money, but the L88's higher values reflect its extreme rarity rather than superior performance. The Hemi proved that sometimes brute force really is the best solution. Chrysler built an engine that delivered massive, usable power with minimum drama and maximum reliability. The L88 represented everything that was both right and wrong with Detroit's approach to ultimate performance. A magnificent racing engine that was almost too advanced for its intended market. Both engines taught an entire generation important lessons about performance philosophy. The most sophisticated solution wasn't always the most effective solution, and sometimes the best engineering was the engineering that actually worked for real people in real situations. So there you have it. The 426 Hemi versus the L88 427, and the story of how Chrysler's brute force approach conquered Chevrolet's sophisticated engineering. The Hemi proved that sometimes the best solution is the simplest solution. Massive power, delivered reliably, with minimum drama. Which philosophy speaks to you? Do you respect the L88's advanced engineering and racing pedigree, even knowing it required expert knowledge to use properly? Or do you appreciate the Hemi's honest brutality and user-friendly violence, proving that the best performance comes from engines that actually work for real drivers? Let us know in the comments, and get ready for a debate that's been raging since these engines first met at drag strips 50 years ago. The sophisticated versus the brutal. And in this case, brutal won by a landslide. Thanks for riding along. And remember, in the muscle car world, the most sophisticated engine isn't always the fastest engine, but it's definitely the one that breaks your heart when the repair bills arrive.